a tough thing to do, too.
Quickly and informed me. Hello, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Fort Myers Beach Town Council. It's our budget hearing, final adoption of the 2019-2020 budget. It's Monday, September 23rd, 2019, and the time is 5:02 p.m. If everyone would just do nothing, because we'll just call this meeting to order. Just stay where you are.
We already pledged allegiance
You
this
stayed,
morning.
we did, that was good, good.
Once a day is sufficient.
Thank you for everybody, thank you to everybody for being here. So the first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment, Michelle, or is there anyone here who would wish to make public comment?
Yes, I have several requests. Under this
I see
section, Mr. Tom Tague has said that he will cede his time to Charlie Eck.
Excellent.
And then I have Charles Eck.
Mr. Eck?
Good evening, my name is Charles Eck. I live at 4183 Bay Beach Lane. I'm a resident of Fort Myers Beach, and I'm here today in support of EBIA and its 1,235 residents. You affectionately or disaffectionately know us as Bay Beach. What brings us here today
Affectionately, Charlie.
are events that led up to the August 5th meeting, as you're aware. We talked about this morning, but I'm going to reiterate the issues as we see them. There were several things that we wrote you about relative to the August 5th meeting, and it was basically our contention that the budgeting and expense items within the general fund for the stormwater utility do not conform to the Stormwater Ordinance 1820, which three of you now sitting here have signed. The first issue that we encountered was the fact that it was a policy issue rather than an ordinance issue as to where you could apply the budget. The fact of the matter is it's not a policy budget, it's an ordinance requirement. The second issue we encountered was old pipes. I've made it clear to you, and I'll make it clear again, that Ordinance 1508 and its construction took all the stormwater activities in Fort Myers Beach and put them into the stormwater utility. And to firm that up, that stormwater utility also took on the debt for what you want to call the old pipes. Our contention is there are no old pipes, there are no new pipes, there's pipes. There's manhole covers, there's outfalls, et cetera, and it all falls under the stormwater utility. The other issue that came up on August 5th was the fact that there weren't enough funds available to pay the $100,000 bill. The fact is, Ordinance 1820 has a provision to have you access funds at all times. You can borrow from the general fund anytime you choose. There was also a lot of discussion about whether or not you could transfer funds from the general fund to the stormwater utility. That issue was never on the table. And while it might be nice to talk about it, the fact of the matter is, until that occurs, there's no sense arguing that point. We were here today for two reasons. One is because we were asked to be on hand in case you wanted to ask us any questions. We're here, okay? And the second issue is we're here to oppose this budget as it's been published, okay? We're making it very clear, the Stormwater Ordinance 18-20, Section 30-110, it makes it clear. It is not a policy that allows you to take stormwater activity and apply it any place else in the budget other than the stormwater utility. We believe that once that's accomplished into the budget, questions that Joanne Champ gets from her constituents regarding its solvency will go away. There'll be complete transparency on the case. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Charlie. Anybody else who wishes to speak? Anyone else?
We have some people signed up for the public
For the
hearings.
public hearings, okay. All right, I'll close the public comment. We'll move on to the second public hearing of Resolution 1924. Establish and levy ad valorem taxes for fiscal year 2019-2020. This is a request to approve Resolution 1924 adopting and levying ad valorem taxes within the town of Fort Myers Beach for the fiscal year 2019 in the amount of 0.95 mils, 0.95 per $1,000, and taking other action as authorized in such resolution. The proposed fiscal year 1920 operating budget is available from the Finance Department on the town's website. So we will open this public hearing. Roger, do you have any comments?
Madam Mayor and members of the council, there's two very, very minor changes to the budget that I just want to call to your attention.
You mean to the millage?
To the millage affecting the total budget. So
Okay.
just to be clear, at the first public hearing on the budget, the question came up with regard to the maritime budget, in particular, the matching amount for the grant, and that has been included in the budget. Also, a refinement of the latest numbers that we received from the property appraiser is also a roughly $2,950 change. So the total change from your first hearing to second hearing is $27,950.
To the positive?
To the positive. Well, it's really raising the budget to accommodate those, to reflect those two changes.
Okay,
So the total was $20,333,660, and it's now $20,361,610.
okay. Anything else?
Those are the changes to date, Madam Chairman.
John Herron, anything?
Just to reiterate, the first item under the state law is adoption of your final millage rate. Unless the millage rate changes as a result of those additional $26,000, then, again, you adopt this resolution and then you discuss the budget and make any changes. If it becomes necessary, then we can either come back and modify the millage resolution, or if you also can table it, take up the budget, bring back the millage, and then sequentially go in the order that's specified by state law.
Thank you for that. Okay. Council, Joanne, would you like to start? Or
I'm happy to start.
Okay, thank you.
Get the party started.
Hold on one second, Joanne. Bob?
Yeah,
What- Yes, at the time you want us to read the resolution.
Yeah, not only do we want to read the resolution before you vote on it, but again, if the discussion is that you're going to embark upon is about the budget, or just the millage rate, then yes. And once you're finished discussing public hearing, we'll read the resolution and you can vote on it.
So let me just ask you this. Joanne, were you just going to millage rate? Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay, so the 0.95%, or 0.95 millage rate is a 12.3% tax increase above the 0.8456 setback rate. So some of my colleagues have called this fiscally responsible to do this because we have projects that loom in the future we haven't identified yet. And I don't think that we really have that necessity to do that. Our town, under current management, has us in an exceptional financial position. And I want to look at that position for a minute. In the 2018-2019 budget, we had an overall budget of $18.1 million. We had reserves of $3.09 million. That's 17% reserves. We all know Florida League of Cities recommends around 19%. Right now, in this budget, we have a total budget of $20.36 million, reserves of $6.28 million. That's 30% reserves. That is actually $2.43 million above the recommended reserves of the Florida League of Cities. I cannot approve this increase based on this projected forward need. We're in an excellent financial position, and I do not believe we should be doing this. We have a totally balanced budget and adequate and exciting add-ons, might I add, including moving forward with different designs at the entrance to Bay Oaks, cameras, everything we sort of wanted on our wish list, all at 0.87. I see absolutely no need, and I don't think it's right to take other people's money and store it away, and when we don't know what we need it for. We have plenty of reserves.
Roxanne?
I have stated my position several times previously, and it has not changed. I would differ from Joanne in saying that we do know what we need it for. We have so many projects that we are looking forward to that this money will not pay for, I don't think, any one of them in totality. So we need to be able to save up some money over a period of several years in order to accomplish these projects rather than borrowing that money. So I would be in favor of the resolution.
Mr. Murphy?
I'm in favor of the resolution. I'll just say that right away. I'm a proponent. I understand what you're saying, Joanne, about not taking people's money and putting it away and so forth, but I don't know if those percentages that are quoted by the Florida League of Cities particularly pertain to our situation being a barrier island here. You know, I don't think we can have enough in reserves in the event of a catastrophe to come along like Irma or someone like that. So I don't think you can have enough put away. And I agree with what Roxanne said about these projects that we have coming in the future. I mean, we're going to have to pay for them somehow, and it's not just us sitting up here saying that we want them. Apparently, there's a lot of people in the town that want these projects to move forward as well. At least that's what we're hearing. So, that being said, I'm going to support this increase, and that's my position.
What are your thoughts, Bruce?
I pretty much agree with what Ray said, particularly the thing about being a coastal barrier island. I don't see that you can have too much money set aside. The needs that we have identified that we're talking about doing, improving Times Square, Bayfront, possibly lighting, landscaping, part of the island. Geez, there's more. I keep a list somewhere, but it's a lot of money that may have a need to be spent. At the MPO the other day, we were talking about construction cost, and the average cost for 1 mile of sidewalk is $750,000, just for a mile of sidewalk. Of course, that's government spending money, but we're government, and I guess we have to follow those rules. You look at what we had to pay for a boat dock or a dock at one of the neighborhoods. It was, what, over $100,000 or something? I mean, it was a lot of money. I mean, so there's no small project. You know, it's not like we're saving money for a $15,000 slide for the kids or something. I mean, you know, these are going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you don't start now, then that just adds another year and another year and another year of never doing anything, and we're going to be the same we always have been. And if we want to improve, we're going to have the money. And so I'm for it.
I didn't sleep well last night, and this is one of the things that was on my mind because I heard Chuck Bodenhofer say to me, "How much have you raised taxes since you've been on council, including rollbacks and whatever?" And since he said that to me, it's been weighing on me, and weighing on me in a kind of an odd sense, because I do believe this is the right thing to do, and yet you make a valid argument. You make a valid argument, and you make one that I think other people share. It is I'm not going to be sitting here this time next year, and I suppose that the three people that take, or whomever the three people are that come and sit at this dais, they'll be in a position, or at least I just said to Roger, a better position to see that next step of the town more clearly, and perhaps have the luxury of, or make the decision to roll it back then. When I listen to you, Joanne, I want to take your point of view. But since I was first elected, the very first speech I gave in 2014 was to the Chamber of Commerce. And I told them, you all probably aren't going to be happy with me because every budget cycle I am going to pitch that the millage rate is simply too low. It's just too low for what this town provides and for what the increased desires and pressures are for this town. So I am going to support the millage rate. I feel like it's kind of ripping off a Band-Aid at this point, taking this step, but I do believe that it will continue to increase the town's capacity to make bigger and bolder decisions as we go into this next period of renovating and upgrading our communities. So if there's no other comments from the council, yes, Bruce, I'll open the public hearing. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, I looked up the trim rate for San Carlos Island. It's 0.96, just as a reference. So I remember last year some people said, well, geez, if we were in Lee County and we didn't have the town, we wouldn't be paying this. Well, you would.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing, or the public comment for the budget, and I have Seal Spuler. If you'd like to speak, and anyone else who would like to may, certainly. It's nice to see you, Seal.
Seal Spuler. Dear Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council, millage rate never even occurred to me when I lived in other places until moving here. It was only then I realized the importance of setting in place the correct tax rate for the upcoming year, as it affects every resident, and not only in their view of trust in their town government, but to meet their needs that affect where they live. I was heartened when the council considered the 0.925 tax rate and they stated their reasons, which I appreciated understanding of what's before them in the months ahead for you and the other council. I name these today as a taxpayer because I want to thank you now for all the work ahead of you, which you stated as follows. You stated you do not want to tie down the upcoming councils. You stated the large project of Bay Oaks needing major renovation or replacement. You felt that Times Square has a need to be updated. But as a taxpayer, when it was stated that would be good for councils to look ahead and not pay as you go, but save as you go, I thought that was the most interesting idea. Then there is the upcoming project to be considered, such as Bayfront Park, and the necessity for safety lighting. And the biggest project of it all is the exciting changes that are coming about with our new Margaritaville development. I thank you here for being such a dedicated council, every one of you, and considering the .925 millage tax rate.
Thank you, Seal. Anyone else care to speak? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Seal lowered the rate on us. Seal, the rate is at .95. That's even better. That's even better. Okay, so if there's no other,
We need to read the resolution?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Resolution number 19-24, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach adopting the final ad valorem millage rate for the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Lee County, Florida for fiscal year 2019-2020 for the fiscal year commencing October 1st, 2019 and ending September 30th, 2020 for the purpose of providing sufficient funds for the general fund, providing an effective date. The Town Council does hereby adopt the final operating ad valorem millage rate for fiscal year 2019-2020 at .9500 mils, which is .9500 for each $1,000 of assessed valuation. The current year rolled back rate is 8.456 mils. The final operating millage rate is 12.35% greater than the rolled back rate. And this resolution is before you pursuant to your properly advertised and noticed public hearing.
Thank you very much, John.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the millage rate, the resolution as stated.
I'd second.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, I just want to, and I think it would be for Mr. Lang. At our last hearing, you said that the extra money was actually going to be specifically designated. Could you tell me that and make sure that the council understands that and future councils understand that?
Yes, thank you very much. In the amended or revised budget summary, I went through first off, pursuant to y'all's direction, that we set up a new fund. It's a capital fund. And the name of it will be Community Enhancement Projects. And that value that's set aside for that is $276,450, which represents 0.08 mils. The current millage rate, of course, in the current year is 0.87, and the 0.08 would take us to the 0.95. And that money is designated just for that particular department or fund and would come to you all for consideration for any expenses that you all determine in the future.
Thank you for that, Joanne. Thank you, Mr. Lang. There's a motion and a second. I'm going to roll call the vote just so everybody's clear. Mr. Murphy, your vote?
Aye.
Rexanne, your vote?
Aye.
Bruce Butcher, your vote?
Aye.
Joanne Shamp, your vote?
No.
Nita Saracita, aye. The motion carries 4-1. If you guys, will you push the buttons here? So just to.
Oh. Got along just fine this morning without this.
On to the next item. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 1925, fiscal year 2019-2020, the town operating and capital budget. It's the second and final hearing. It's a request to approve Resolution 1925, adopting the town operating budget, the capital budget, and fee schedules for fiscal year 2019 and 2020, finding that it's consistent with the requirements of the comprehensive plan. Mr. Hernstat?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is where, if you were so inclined to take up the issue that came up during public comment today by Mr. Echt on behalf of EDIA, as well as there was a mention during this morning session about some minor fee adjustments, if you wanted to take a look at those. I believe Councilor Butcher mentioned the impact fee rates, if you wanted to discuss those things, although they don't necessarily impact the general fund budget. That's where here's where you could theoretically take up those three subjects.
Thank you very much. Let's take those one by one. Could we start with the impact fee rates, Bruce? Would you, please?
We prepared a chart. I will tell you that it was a little challenging because some of you may be aware that Lee County's technology was hacked, and a lot of their information is not currently accessible online.
Okay.
But I do want to thank
Thank you.
the Lee County staff for helping us work around that issue to get us the information.
Yes, thank you to them.
I don't know if you want to put one on the screen or not, but
Jason, you here for questions, or?
well, I think
Bruce?
it'd be just to help you understand, so you read the chart correctly.
Okay.
He'll just walk you through it real quick, so I'm
Thank
sure you're not misinterpreting anything.
Go ahead, Jason.
So a lot of their categories are similar, not all of them, so I've had to massage a little bit. But on the left column, you have the uses per our impact fee ordinance and fee schedule. The next column, the next group of columns are transportation. So you have the Lee County transportation adopted at the full rate. I'm not sure if you're aware, but when they did their study, they set a dollar amount. That is I guess the need based on the study. And then what they've done after that is adopted at a lower percentage of that. And a lot of communities are looking at that 30, 40, 50, 70%. There's not a lot that have adopted at 100% of what the study says. Lee County, when they did it last year, was 45% with 2.5% increase each year. So they're at 47.5%. That's what that third column is. And then the fourth column is our rates that were established many years ago. Then the next group is the parks. And again, it's the both agencies have them split them up into regional and community park rates. So we have the Lee County Regional adopted full rate, the Lee County Regional, what's at the 47.5 right now. Then the Fort Myers Beach Regional, and then again we switched to the community adopted rate for the community parks, and then again 47.5%, and then the final is the FMB community. So those, what's not included in here is the fire district and the schools, because those are set by the district in Lee County through a separate ordinance. Our ordinance recognizes those, whatever they end up getting set at, that's what we charge, and that's a pass through to them. So these are the ones that are really controllable by you in comparison to Lee County.
Okay. Bruce?
So in the transportation rate for the single house, for those of you that can't see this, Lee County's full rate is 9,000.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Michelle, could you use your copy? Do you have a copy that you could put on this up?
And I was trying to put this together between the meetings, so I do apologize for
That's okay.
not having enough.
You're fine.
Had to recreate the
That's
spreadsheet.
good.
So at any rate, the single-family adopted rate, full rate, is 9,996. Lee County's current rate, this is for transportation, is 4,748, and ours is 2,900.
Correct.
So we could easily increase ours by $7,000 and still be legal, right?
Well, I know John's going to jump in here.
That was a very interesting squeak.
No.
Sorry, okay, no. Legal. I'll be quiet.
That might have come from me, too.
No, you would actually, before you can increase your impact fees, you will have to do a study to validate those. It may come in at those numbers, and certainly Lee counties would be one of the ones that a consultant would look at, because you're supposed to look in your area. But you can't rely solely on what the counties are and say, we're going to increase ours. You do have to go
The
through a
reason I
study.
said that is because I was under the impression that we had adopted ours based on Lee County.
It may have been one of the jurisdictions that your consultant looked at when they were first adopted, but under the applicable statute mechanism as well as the case law, you would have to do an updated study to determine before you could increase your current rates.
Which you have not done in years, but.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm the bearer of bad news. It's just that's
Not
what the courts have said.
necessarily
Yeah,
bad
you know.
See, I don't know that's a fact. I don't know when our study was done, what the basis of the study was. It may have, couldn't it have been based on Lee County?
It may have been one of the ones, but it doesn't mean that you said whatever Lee County is doing, we automatically adopt as ours. You have to do your own independent study before you can change your rates, certainly increase them.
So maybe to split the two, you have in your ordinance approved what Lee County and their study ends up doing for the school and the fire district stuff. So when they do redo the study every few years, they do redo that, relook at that, and you have agreed.
That's just a pass-through, that doesn't.
Right, because it's other agencies that are doing that. That's the only part that refers to that. Lee
So
County study.
how long has it been since we've done a study?
I haven't found any since the original, but
What year was that?
it was
When
in
the town was founded?
yes, late 90s, early 2000s.
Wow, that would seem out of date.
Interestingly, some of the rates are almost within $1 of the 47.5% of Lee County in some of the other categories. So there is some differences that Mr. Butcher pointed out, but there's also some like literally within $1. If you look at ALFs, for example, it's $1 off.
Remember when we talked about this early on, Summer brought this up? It didn't go anywhere. Why was that? Do you remember?
I seem to remember that we were told at the time that our
This
rates were
was the way
based
it
on
was.
Lee County and
Yeah.
da-da-da-da.
And
So,
it just kind of,
so round figures, how much does a study cost? Is it $100,000, $500,000,
Closer to 100.
$100,000?
It's probably accurate.
So you'd have to do a lot of raising to make up that difference, the cost of the study.
It's about 2 years worth of income, yeah.
2 years?
Sure, approximately. Depending on the fiscal or the conditions.
It happened, the last time we brought this up, it was the same thing. It was just, it was like we hit a wall with it. And
So let me perhaps give you some comfort. Most of the land here is developed, not all, but most. So that means that when someone demolishes something and they rebuild it, it doesn't have an impact. Only their incremental increase would have an impact. So if we were in town where half of our properties were vacant land, you know, these rates would be very, 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 very important. But in light of where we are, and you knock down a single-family home and you add a single-family home, a new single-family home, you're not going to get a big impact, if any impact whatsoever. So because of those physical attributes of the town, it is perhaps not as critical as it might be for some other places where there's a lot of vacant land.
Roger, I remember, this was back pre-Margaritaville, pre-everything. but there was the discussion then about the potential for that redevelop. Well, I remember we talked about this in that ad hoc committee. There was discussion then about that being a potential big revenue for the town. But that, again, would only be that incremental because it's not raw land. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, we would go back and see, you have to see what they physically had on the land and look at the actual increases, and then the rates would only be applicable to the increases.
So if you have a 1,200-foot cottage and you knock it down and put a 5,000 square foot home there, what's the incremental impact?
For your rate, there is not. Single family is single family. A lot of what you've seen is.
Wait. So if a house is already there.
Right.
And I knock it down and put something else there, is it going to be the 2,900 or whatever it was?
No, there would be no change. There wouldn't be a charge because it's single family for single family. What you do have is a lot of single family being torn down and a duplex being built.
Multifamily.
They get charged for the extra unit. So your rate is not based on square footage of units. It's type, single family, multifamily. And actually the single family includes the duplex too. So they would get charged, a new duplex would get charged 1 unit at the, whatever that was, 2971 plus the parks.
But then I agree that it's not going to be much since we don't have many vacant properties around here. But there are a few.
But where we see the big change is when you change use. So if you take an existing building, you change to a higher intensity use, we do charge the difference in the rate. So if you were a
Oh, yeah,
office
sure.
to a restaurant, they get charged the difference in whatever that rate would be.
Well, I would think that at some point in time, somebody ought to get a quote just to do a re-rate study, just so you know. So maybe it was only $7,000 because we're so little, and they say, well, we got one over here that's about yours. And
Well, I mean, other than the investment of staff time, we could put out an RFP for the study and get a price and bring that back to council, and you could decide whether it's something you want to pursue at that
Right.
point.
I mean, now we know where we are, which I never knew, or how we got there. So it's just information. I'd just like to close the loop on it and be done. Maybe be done, probably be done. But
Anybody else have anything they want to add to this? Joanne, did you want to add?
Just on that?
Yeah, just on the impact fee
No.
issue? Okay, so this is set aside? Okay. Next thing, let's do EBIA. Now, I'm going to call it something different. Let's talk about stormwater. Rexanne?
Oh, thanks.
Well,
Well,
you're welcome.
I guess
Thanks, Ray.
the first thing I would do is get organized up here, because I need to switch from impact fees to stormwater.
Come back to you?
No.
Okay.
I've got it. I reprinted and read the letters that have been sent to us by Bay Beach. And I have now obtained an accurate copy of a case that's cited by Mr. Herron in his memorandum. I guess my first question would be to John. The letter that I have from Bay Beach, and I don't know if you know which one, I can pull it out if you need me to say it, but it ends by saying there are two things that they take issue with. One is what you address in your memorandum, but they also take issue with transparency of the budget, if I'm stating that correctly. And I don't remember that you talked about in your memorandum. Do you have anything you'd like to add along the lines of their position about transparency regarding the stormwater budget?
Well, I haven't seen in the budget packet that I've seen, there is a sheet, you know, there's a series of sheets for the stormwater utility setting forth its budget. I certainly would defer to the manager and to staff, Mr. Lang, to the extent that there's any question that that budget does not comply with the general standards for, government accounting, it's, budgets are like, you can make them up, or not make them up. You can prepare them in any way, in a number of different ways to reflect the information that's there. It's a matter of public record, and I really can't speak to is it set up the way that maybe the Bay Beach group would like? Maybe not, but it is presumably staff would not put before you a budget that does not comply with the governmental accounting standards that we are required to follow.
Bob, do you want to add to that in any way? Okay.
That, most everything has been said correctly, that the budget's presented to you in the format that is followed by all finance officers in the state of Florida and the United States in general terms. So clarity and transparency was put into the budget for you all to look at, and just like the town attorney said, it is presented to you in that same fashion, and there's nothing inappropriate or misguided in any way that budget is presented to you.
Well, I'm looking at the budget, and I find two separate pages that have to do. One says stormwater maintenance, page 35, and one says stormwater operations, page 47. And when I look at the proposed 2020 budget on page 47, there's only 2 items listed.
Also 48 too, page 48.
Okay, stormwater operations then has, on the next page, 2 more items. Out of multiple lines, there's many, many zeros.
Okay.
So it seems like we've clumped a lot of stuff together, and
No.
I don't know if that is the issue. I'm not a budget person.
So
I struggle
let me
with
see if I
this.
can help you. What the funding source for the stormwater utility is?
No, that's not the
Hang on a
question.
second, I hear your question. Let me just say my preface, and then if I don't answer your question, I'll try again. What the funding source is not relevant to the 2 pages or reports you would have in your budget. You would have a report for capital expenses, and you would have a report for operational expenses. So you're going to have 2 reports for your stormwater utility budget, irrespective of what the funding source is. So right now, there's 2 funding sources. You're being asked for it to be 1 funding source, but it wouldn't change the fact that you would have an operational page and a capital page.
And if I'm looking at page 48, there are all these categories. Contracted services, 0. Other services, administrative charges, 0. Utility services, 0. Repairs and maintenance services, 0. The only 2 items on that page that have numbers are the top category, and I'm having trouble following here across. It looks like licenses, permits, and fees. Whereas the 2018 budget had a lot of things broken down. So it seemed to have more transparency than the 2020 budget.
Well, it was explained in the prior year, but I'll try to go through it just as the manager presented to you. When you look at page 48, that is the stormwater fund. That's where the revenues are collected from the ERUs. And those funds, as I've been advised and been following the council's direction, is to be the funding source for us to be able to gain as much leverage out of the state revolving fund, which we're putting our capital into the ground.
So I'm going to interrupt you because the page I'm looking at doesn't say funding sources, it says expenses.
Yes, ma'am, there's a page in front of it for revenues.
Okay.
So
well,
just to be
that's not-
clear with everyone, so page 47 is the stormwater revenues. Page 48 right now reflects the capital component of the stormwater expenditures. The operating component right now is on, I'll find the page number for you.
35?
35.
I believe it's 35.
Yes.
which in and of itself, that we have this spread about, and it would be really nice if we're all clumped together.
There's a,
Well, I want to be clear, you're going to have a revenue page and you're going to have 2 expenditure pages irrespective of what the source is. One will be for the operational expenses and one will be for the capital expenses. So that won't change irrespective of how you decide to fund it.
Can I just-
Charlie, do you want to respond to
Oh,
that?
no, no,
No.
no, 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 not at this moment. You can
let
respond
me
during,
mention something.
during public hearing. Go ahead.
Robert was explaining a while ago to me when I went upstairs that the reason that they're split is because when you borrow money from the state, you're borrowing strictly and only for the capital activity. And that's why you're separating the two. You have the capital side and you have the administrative operating side.
I don't have a problem that they're split. I'm looking at a page that's full of zeros, that things aren't broken down.
So,
What you're doing, you're receiving money in one page, and on the other page, you're paying the contractor.
she's saying she doesn't see
well,
that.
well,
Chad, how-
let's see if I could help out a little bit. Number one, the page 48, I believe it was, you were looking at, where you're seeing all the zeros. As of this date, the town does not have any debt applications to pay back to the state. They will in 2021. What we're showing here is the revenues that are being collected and set aside, and they become your revolving cash to be able to borrow money from the state. We spend the money for the improvements to the capital program, which is your storm program. When the monies are returned to us from the state, they go back into that account, and then we can continue to roll through. If we didn't have the money, we'd have to be borrowing it from the general fund. So the collection of revenues are coming into this fund, being kept there and not being spent on any other type of expenses that could reduce your availability to meet your demand, which would be to pay the capital expenditures when they occur. Because we're going to spend money today, and by the time I get all my documentation together and send it to the state for their validation of the information to make sure everything is kosher, it takes about 2.5 months. So this cash coming in daily helps provide that cash flow until we get reimbursed from the state. So we're always going to be on a lag until let's say your project is going to run $21 million. When you reach that plateau, your current rate of billings, assessments, can't pay anything other than the debt that has been incurred. So for the next X number of years, that $1.2 million or $1.1 million will go toward the retirement of debt. We haven't had to pay any debt yet. We will start next year. So that's why you don't see any expenses in here at this time.
Counselor, I think the reason why you see the zeros is that we don't necessarily, this was a new financial system that the town implemented. We're picking up expenses from prior years that have come through in some cases. So you have a interest income of $118. We're not necessarily budgeting for those that level, and that's why you have in the proposed 2020 budget only on page, for example, 75, you only have 4 numbers in a total.
Mr. Lang,
Yes, ma'am.
I want to tell you, maybe this is a 4th grade explanation of how I view this. I have no question about our ability to use general fund dollars however the heck we choose to. But I do believe that the intent of the utility we created was to act as a house for every transaction that takes place with stormwater. And that house should be explicitly clear as to costs, revenues, debt, maintenance, contractors, whatever happens for stormwater should be held in that box, and only that box. Now, that box can then become part of our budget, obviously, but it's in a box. I think about it as my stores. The Islander is only the Islander. Local Color's not going to have a bill for the cleaning lady to do the windows at the Islander, because then it just gets way too mucky. Is it in one pocket and out of the other of mine? Yes, but it's transparent, it's clear, it's itemized. I truly believe that the intent of that utility was to allow everyone to be able to look at it and say, not say what Roxanne's saying right now, why are these zeros or why is what, and maybe the answer would be the same, so please excuse me if that's the case. But it's simply that clear to me that however it needs to be organized, expenses, debt, revenues, all needs to be contained within that utility.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. From my standpoint, as your finance director, I'm looking at where the town has made commitments to the tune, what appears to be almost $20 million.
Yes, sir.
If you spend all your money now on operating expenses and mix it up with your capital expenditures, you're not going to have money after you reach $14 million of capital, and the rest of your stormwater cannot be built without you going through another exercise of where your source is going to be, and that'd be your choice. I felt that the clearness of transparency is that all of your money collected, you can see where it's going to go. Right now, there is no direct expense, operating expenses on the new system. There is none. It's been built. Therefore, the old system has to be maintained some way. So we have the same department number, just in another location, like Roger was saying. So therefore, we do know what the stormwater costs are going to be to you, and you can always see it. When it comes down to your expenses for the capital expenditures, as I was saying earlier, if you don't have the cash flow in your stormwater to meet the demands of your contractor, then I've got to come back to you all and say, we need $400,000 or $500,000 to be able to fund this next draw. And I'm going to be coming to you about 5 times during a year to the tune of $3 or $4 million. If you look,
I think we're getting a feel, though. I think the issue, Madam Mayor, really, is if there's questions about reporting, we can work on you to try to address those. The issue is purely if you want all the expenses because the council felt that was a commitment made to the community, or you think it's the appropriate thing to do, to be paid out of the stormwater fund, then that's purely a policy decision for you to make. All I need to be sure you're aware of is this, that right now, those maintenance costs are not built into the ERU rate, and that will have to be addressed. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it if that's the decision the council would like to go forward.
Well,
it's going to have to be addressed at some point.
it will have to be addressed, but to me, it's just that clear. And I guess it's because I hope to never talk about stormwater again, because it's been a painful thing. It's been painful, with all due respect. But it's just that, it's simply.
Well, at least once, if not twice more.
Yep.
So
Okay.
just to forewarn you.
Okay, well, that's my comment on it. Joanne?
All right, so are we on to funding source then? Or are we still talking about how this is itemized?
I started out on one topic, people took it somewhere else, and I've sat back.
But if
because-
your topic, does your topic not get somehow encompassed with what I said, or no? Doesn't satisfy your,
I guess what I would say is, I believe that there are two topics. One is the transparency of the budget, and it doesn't feel transparent to me. And I say that I'm not good with budgets, but a budget should be fairly understandable by the layperson. That's why we do them, so that people have some understanding. So this, to me, wasn't cutting the mustard. So for that topic, that's what I will say. I don't think it has to be redone before we pass the budget, but I would like to see it redone with more clarity. So then moving on to the other topic, which is can we use funding for this? I guess I'd like to say a couple of things. This has been extremely difficult for me because I have extreme respect for all of the people that are giving me advice. But I do want to mention here today one person that is missing that I did seek advice from, and that was Jim Steele, who I have great respect for. And he came down on the side of Mr. Herron and the former town council and the town with the opinion that we could take from the general fund. Having said that, I think if we decide to go down that path as a group, that I think we need to set a specific policy that says it's only going to be for this, that future council, well, we never can bind a future council, but that we could express an opinion that it should not be expanded some years and et cetera. So I'll stop for now.
okay? Joanne?
I have a question for Mr. Eck, but I'm not being allowed to ask him
You
questions
can
yet.
ask as
so-
soon as we open the public comment, public hearing.
Okay.
Go ahead, Joanne.
To, as EBIA knows, I have been full on board in making sure that they got their exemption. This, however, is a different topic, and I do feel that our ordinance 30-109A6 has this, and I believe, as has been shown by law and our town attorney, that the town has the right, and we have to be fiscally responsible. And I don't think that we should constrain that right. The use of the general fund for public benefit is the discretion of town council, and I think that that's really important. And I look at this rather simply. I liked your little house and box, whatever thing, but I look at this simply, and that is, that as individuals, we have water that rains onto our property that may drain into the street, and we're paying our ERUs for that. And EBIA has a very elaborate system, and that's why they're not paying ERUs. But the town also has 27 miles of streets that the rain falls on. The street itself. I don't own that street. You don't own the street in front of you. Nobody does. We all do collectively. That first inch of rain and the oil and the gasoline that sit on top of it are the prime pollutant. And we have 27 miles of roads that EBIA owns, just like all of us here and anybody else who owns property on this island. We also have Newton Park, we have Town Hall. They pay ERUs. They must be paying out of the general fund because we all own those properties, and they do pay their ERUs. So that's a whole different thing, and that is the public purpose part of the stormwater utility that we all share, even if we're not, even while we're all doing our ERU or exempt from the ERU. And so I think that, and the other thing is, you have to remember that the general fund is just not ad valorem taxes. It's parking revenue. It's everything else. And don't we have a right to use parking revenue for all the pollutants that the cars that come off island bring on and settle at one of our beach accesses, I'm going to say Connecticut Street, with all the paved parking spots? That is all stormwater that has to be cleaned. And you and I all own that. We all own that Connecticut Street beach. We all own these things. So a way of using the general fund stream for the visitors and for what we all own And I don't think that we should have our hands tied on that. I don't think that we have the right to use it. I think we should continue to use it, and I don't think we should constrain future councils on it. I think that we need to, the town is in good financial stead. The ERUs are covering the construction right now. This will be evaluated annually. I don't think we should constrain future councils in that way. So I personally feel that I personally support use of general fund as it's being proposed here and is allowed by the ordinance, I believe, and by state law.
Bruce?
Well, I just as soon we didn't have to talk about this and just let it roll. I understand Charlie and Tom and everyone's position over there at EBIA. I don't know how much money this would account to, and I don't think they care whether it's going to hit them $10,000 or 10 cents. They just, by principle, don't want to pay anything for it. The way the ordinance was written seems fairly clear that it's all inclusive, as you were saying, Anita. However, the way the thing was initialized when we established the ERU, before this final ordinance was written, was that Jim Steele had a column for maintenance that wasn't part of the state payback, as I remember it. So we've got ourselves into a twisted situation. I understand Robert's position that we need to separate capital from operating expenses so that we can be clear when we go to the state and have to do all the audit steps and dances, that it's a pure capital investment that the state's loaning money for. They're not loaning money for maintenance, is the way I understand it. So they need to be separated, and it's to me, it's somewhat of a coin flip. The ordinance says put it all in there. The initial intent when we established CRU was a little different, I believe. So, vote your conscience.
Murphy?
I find it hard to, of course, I wasn't here for this ordinance, but I'm not using that.
Count your blessings.
I'm not using that as an excuse, but I'm just stating the fact. So I wasn't here for that discussion. But I'm a firm believer that when you pass ordinances, that you stick by them. I mean, how can we enforce our own ordinances upon our own citizens if we don't follow them ourselves? So there's a conflict here. And you stated it yourself, Madam Mayor. So that's where I'm coming down on this from my viewpoint. My background is in accounting, and I like to see things accounted for. You know, I like to see where it's coming from, where it's going to, and where it should be properly located. And that appears to me the way the ordinance was set up, was written to accomplish that. So I also understand the town's position, the management position, and Joanne stated it eloquently, that we are allowed by law to use the general fund. I get it. But I don't know why you go through an exercise of setting up these systems if you don't use them. I don't, that part I don't understand. So I'm going to listen to the rest of these discussions and then make my mind up. But that's sort of where I'm leaning, in that direction.
Rexanne, do you want to ask your question so when Mr. X stands up, he could answer it? Yes, go ahead, Joanne, sorry.
You're talking about the ordinance and your faithfulness to the ordinance, which I commend. I agree that. But you do recognize that under the revenue sources for the utility in the ordinances, under sources of funding, it says any other legal revenue source. And that includes
Well, I
the
did
general fund.
yes,
So I'm just saying, it is in the ordinance. It is in the ordinance. So I'm sorry. Go.
Well, yeah, okay. I mentioned that.
Okay. Roxanne, what's your question? Because we'll let Charlie, because, so the speakers I have for the public hearing are Mr. Yateman, who is ceding time to Charlie Eck, Tom Tagey, who is also ceding time, Charlie Eck, Lorraine Yateman, and Dan Hughes. So I'll call Mr. Eck to the podium, or the lectern, which if we want to be specific. And Roxanne, if you would just ask your question.
Well, I can tell you I was leaning the other way until I received the memorandum from Mr. Herron, which included the citation to City of Key West versus Key West Golf Club homeowners, and Mr. Herron can tell you, I struggled with this. I read the first hearing, I read the second decision. It appears in this decision that the folks that are saying we can spend money out of the general fund are supported by this decision, and I wondered whether you had any comment on it. It's relatively new. It's 2017.
I do have comment about Mr. Herron's position.
No, I'm asking if you have comment about City of Key West versus Key West Golf Club homeowners.
I have no comment about that case.
Okay.
None.
It seems to be very encompassing of the issues here. It's involving a homeowners association which has their own stormwater system, et cetera, and the court goes on to say that they certainly can. In fact, they're charging them more than we're charging you. They're being charged regular fees, as I understand it from my discussion with Mr. Herron, and not getting a reduction of any kind. And the court found that to be acceptable. So I'm feeling constrained by this case, and I wondered whether your attorney had advised you about it and said, hey, this affects our position.
Roxanne, as I said this morning, I'll say again.
Charlie,
We weren't here, I'm sorry.
Say your name for the record.
Okay, my name is
please.
Charles Eck. I live at 4183 Bay Beach Lane. I'm a resident of Fort Myers Beach, okay? Our position going into this hearing this evening is that the use of general funds to support the utility were not on the table. And as far as we know, based on the budget that we see, are still not on the table. If you put them on the table, we'll stand up and discuss them. I understand the case that Mr. Herron's bringing. There's a number of cases in the state of Florida that he's not brought up. I will tell you in his discussions, he's indicated, appropriately so, that generally speaking, you can use general funds how you wish. He also indicated that they're being used for stormwater systems all over the state. The truth is, it's less than half of the stormwater utilities in the state use general funds. I took it upon myself to talk to a number of facilities that don't use general funds, because I'm curious as to why they don't. Yesterday, I took a look at the paper, and we're characterized as a funky town, okay? We're in a funky town where the utility in this town has told Bay Beach officially, we will never hook you up, and we can't. I don't know that that was the case in Key West. I didn't read that. But that's the case here. And that's going to be a little bit different. If we wind up going to the mat on this case, I think there's going to be different issues at play. But I don't want to get into the ability to use general funds yet. I think there's a bigger issue and broader one here. And that's the issue that I listened to Mr. Lang, he's incorrect. He may establish his accounts in terms of general accounting technology, but the reality is it does not conform to this ordinance. And no one has addressed the ordinance, which I brought up. Section 30-110 is clear. There is no question what the town must do. I run a business. I've got a capital account. I've got an expense account. Joanna's run a business, capital account, expense account. That's an accounting problem. But in terms of this town, Anita's observation is absolutely on point. Everything is in the stormwater utility budget. What we object to strenuously is not only is operations and maintenance in the general fund line item, Where's administrative costs for the stormwater utility? Where's insurance? Where's transportation? Where's depreciation? You're talking about a capital reserve account. This stormwater utility should have its own. If you want to look at a utility that's got a lot of line entries, look at your water utility. It's several pages. And I don't know that there's a requirement as stringent as this for the accounting methodology in that utility. And you can't establish an ERU rate until you know what your budget is. And to Joanne, I would say, to the folks that have asked you, when you say, we're fine, and they say, how much is the budget? You can't answer because you don't know. That's the fallacy here. The other thing I'll tell you, in this room, there's 3 people that were architects in this budget, in this ordinance. Bruce is one of them, Mayor Hughes was one, and I'm one, okay? Joanne, you bring up roads. The town wanted roads out of the ordinance at the front end. It was mentioned in 1508, and they wanted it gone because it brought on a lot of problems, as Anita will tell you, and was collecting ARUs from Estero Boulevard. That was initially the case. So those, I just don't want to go hugging clouds here. We have to talk about real things. The other thing that this ordinance brings up that no one has talked about yet is Ordinance 1820 provides for the borrowing of funds from the general fund. We strategically put that in. Bruce, you recall that. We were concerned that as we established this budget, we wanted it on a self-sufficient basis. That's how it had to be, principally because we had facilities in this town that got a special benefit, like Hercules, but not Bob Miller. You recall that? I do, okay? We put the borrowing in there specifically. Why? Because you may need money where you're going to get it. Our intent was to be able to provide that flexibility, but not to be the third leg of the stool to support the stormwater utility. What should support the stormwater utility are the people that are in it, and not everybody's in it. And it's not that we're stingy folks at Bay Beach. We're not. You folks know that, all of you. The issue at hand here is what's the right thing to do. And the problem is, here we are at budget time, and what's really being forced upon you, because I'm sitting here saying you have to do it this way. It's not optional, okay? The next thing you're going to face is, I'm short on ERU. That's what really you're talking about. I'll give you a suggestion. I'm not an accountant. You guys know that, okay? Give you a suggestion. Borrow down from the general fund, like the ordinance provides, and we'll worry about sorting out this problem later. That gets you past your crisis. But we've got a real problem here, and this budget just doesn't pass muster. And you're against the timeline. I don't think any of you want to establish an ERU rate between now and the end of the month. It's going to take a lot of discussion. But there's a suggestion to get you past. You take the same dollars that are in the general fund today, transfer them into the stormwater budget, make it a loan payable back to the general fund, and we'll sort that issue out later. But it gets you to where you're going to want to go tonight. I throw that out for your consideration. I'll answer any question you have, Rex, and you know that.
My question was regarding this specific case. I found it to be quite overwhelming in its breadth.
I understand. I agree. Okay?
So that was my question.
But check out Port St. Lucie's case. They absolutely do not use general funds. That town almost went bankrupt because of this issue. And I talked to them. I mean, there's different cases for different reasons. I'm not an attorney. And John, I'm not going to sit here and combat with you on those issues. Okay? I couldn't afford to go out of law school when I got out of college. But the issues are pretty clear to me. What's fair and what's the right thing to do for this town? We don't mind paying taxes at Bay Beach. What we do mind is supporting the operational side of a stormwater utility that this town has made it clear we will never be part of. It's just not fair.
Anything else, Charlie?
No, that's it.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Lorraine Yateman. Lorraine, you have anything to add? Thank you so much, Lorraine. Dan Hughes?
Good afternoon, Dan Hughes, for the record.
Good afternoon, Dan.
I don't represent the Bay Beach area, but I have to say that I am in accord with the analysis that Charlie Eck has made. having been involved in drafting that ordinance, I think, Anita, you put your finger on it when you wanted to put it all in a
House.
box. And I'm going to quote again from the ordinance, both 1508 and reenacted in 1830, which specifically says, the enterprise fund shall be an independent and separate accounting of all, and I emphasize all, revenues, expenditures, assets, liabilities, earnings, and obligations of the utility. And goes on to say for the following purposes, including costs of administration, operation and maintenance, billing and administrative costs. Now, if you are in fact in this budget expending out of the general funds for maintenance and other expenses relating to stormwater, you're not only clearly in conflict with the specific language, not just the intent as you indicated, Anita, but the specific language of that ordinance. I don't know how you can reconcile that accounting otherwise than when you created an enterprise fund. There should be an enterprise fund page, should all be on one page, and the ordinance is very clear. Now, if you're not going to do that, then face reality. You're changing policy. You're changing the policy that was created at 1508 and reenacted in 1830, 1820. You're changing the policy, and you're clearly inconsistent with the terms of the ordinance. Now, I'm not familiar. I haven't read the Key West case, Rexanne. One thing I would look for if I were reading that case is what does their ordinance provide? Do they had they created an enterprise fund? I don't know that. I think that might be a significant point to consider.
Thank you, Dan. Is there anybody else who would like to discuss this particular topic? Actually, this is actually for the whole budget, the public hearing, not just this particular issue. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. You know, Joanne, the by any legal means necessary, I think allows, the quote, the section that you quote, I think allows us to do as Mr. Eck proposed or as Jim Steele proposed, to utilize general fund dollars. I think that allows it. But I just can't escape the construct of how we, from its inception, discussed, and believe me, I said to Roger today, if I could go back, I'd unwind this one. I would, but we did things the way we did them, and I think in order to move forward in a very clear and judicious way, I think we have to be careful with this stormwater ordinance, and as Dan just said.
So who's responsible for cleaning the rain that falls on our streets, and who pays for that? Just the people who are paying ERUs, nobody else? We don't share those burdens?
Of course, we share the burdens.
And so
However,
how do we do that?
However, that's not how we set it up. We set it up with.
But we did, it's in there.
And you can put some money there if you want, but it's still got to be within the confines of that ordinance. I don't think that the two issues are necessarily mutually exclusive, but it is that ordinance and our stormwater was based specifically on benefit. That's how, and yes, I know the benefit is your road is clean and you get to pass Estero Boulevard.
your
You
water.
can drive down
How about your
Connecticut
near-shore
Street or
water?
to my house. I don't disagree with
And
you.
that's clearly stated in the Key West decision what public benefit means. clearly stated.
Okay, so what's the resolution of this issue? Because I've made myself clear. I think speakers have made themselves clear, but I'm not really clear where, I know where you stand, Joanne. I'm not sure where Rexanne is. I thought I did. I'm not sure where either of you gentlemen are.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I may, I think I'm trying to view this as dispassionately as possible, irrespective of what, I've already said in my memo. But I think what part of the issue here is, from what I can see, is that we're equating the establishment of an enterprise fund with it can only be funded through ERUs. And I'm not so sure that either, well, I don't believe that that's the case at all. The establishment of enterprise fund means that you have to account for all revenues. So if one of the revenue sources is ERUs, it gets accounted for. It gets listed as ERUs X dollars. General fund dollars, general fund Y dollars. General fund loan Z dollars. It gets accounted for because I'm looking at the actual ordinance between, as was being discussed by some of the speakers, of comparing it to the current version that was adopted versus the previous one. And for all intents and purposes, and looking at the ordinance on page 726 of your package, those sections of the ordinance didn't change from the previous version to the current version. There was just some minor, what I would call editorial comments that don't affect the substance of it. For example, it used to say revenue source, or it used to say establishment of enterprise fund, and when we changed the heading because it was separately identified as revenue sources for utility at section 3108 is now 3109. And the changes there are civil, we changed this utility ordinance to this article, which is proper. And then last, it used to say any other reasonable source of funds to now any other legal revenue source. And with respect to the enterprise fund establishment, again, the changes were, as Mr. Ecken had pointed out, there was an addition of a provision that says you could also you could borrow money from the general fund if you so desired, and that's an alternative.
Yes, it is.
But otherwise, the accounting procedures and what is supposed to be in the budget has stayed the same. And last but not least, during the discussion, I asked the manager if the utility fund prior to the change, which again hasn't, the operative language of the code didn't change substantively, is that the town has been supplementing the stormwater utility with general fund revenue for many years.
Prior to the establishment of the ordinance. I mean, because prior to that, of course, that's just.
I'm saying in particular from 2015, which was the adoption of that version, and today there has been general revenue fund that has gone into the utility fund. And certainly staff can correct me, it was before my time, but that's what I've been informed. So, whether or not I don't believe that the modifications to the ordinance, as we're discussing the substantive provisions here tonight, are significantly different to affect what was being done before. This is as I understand it.
Okay, well, thank you. Rexanne, you're leaning in.
Well, I'm leaning in because I thought of some things to say. Earlier today, Mr. Eck made reference to a council person who did not feel the original setting of the ERUs was sufficient. That was me. At the time, I didn't feel it was sufficient. my understanding is that we need to use general funds because maintenance was not included when the ERUs were set. I made myself clear at that point that I thought the ERUs should be higher, but since they are not, I feel constrained by the fact that we need to use general funds to make sure that the ongoing maintenance does occur. The question in my mind now is, do we call it a loan or not?
And how do you feel about that? You can think on it.
Yes.
Joanne, you're leaning in.
No, I don't think it should be a loan. I think we have the right to use general funds, and I believe we should use general funds, that there is enough, I've stated it already, there's enough public benefit, as well as the individual benefit being paid by the ERUs for your own individual responsibility to support that. And I think, just like home rule, that we should not be constraining future councils' opportunities to use general fund on this. It's very short-sighted, in my opinion.
Then what is to stop the public from all coming forward and saying, well, we don't want to pay these ERUs, let's lower the ERUs and use general funds for 95% of the stormwater?
There would be anything that would preclude that if.
What's the point of even having the ERU system?
Sure, exactly. Bruce? Ray?
Having fun being mayor?
Well, no, I mean, I feel, Joanne, I feel you're very clear. I think I've been very clear, and I also have said I don't think the issues are mutually exclusive. There will be a shortfall of approximately $300,000, Roger said. Is that accurate, Roger?
I believe that is the number. It's not a shortfall, so let me be clear about this. And since this issue has arisen, I've been consistent in saying to you all that this is a policy decision for the council. The wheels will not come off the cart irrespective of which way you go. Okay, I want to be very clear about that. Right now, if you are inclined to support the argument that it was intended that the utility be all-inclusive, you can make that your policy tonight, but you have to do it with the caveat that Councilor Haspas pointed out, which is the RUs are insufficient, and you're going to have to adjust those after an appropriate study by a rate consultant. And that doesn't mean it has to be done tomorrow or the next day, but it does have to be done. You have two levels of maintenance that individual will have to look at. One is the old system, if you will, and then the new system, and for a total impact over time to the ERUs. But once you acknowledge that that is on the horizon, this really is a policy decision from the perspective of what do you think is right and best for the community.
So any future council could change this.
Sure.
Yes,
So
they
we're
could.
struggling with all this today, and yet no matter what we do next year, the council could change it.
Well, the answer to that is yes, but I also think you have to recognize, at least I recognize that
It'd be
this
fools to
town,
touch this one.
this town tends to look back at precedent. And, once you shift into a direction, I would say that would be pretty hard for a subsequent council to go back. Not that they couldn't. I think you've all pretty much said that you have the right to use general fund money for this. Now the question is, do you think that's the correct policy?
And I think the other question is then are you more than happy to eliminate any of the pollution that visitors and anybody brings to our streets on the island? And
That's a
say
good
that,
argument. That's a
say
good
that
argument.
those of us who are paying the ERUs are the only ones that are responsible for that? And we're the only ones that are responsible for the streets, that the rain falls on our streets? That if you're not paying an ERU, then you don't have responsibility for any of those public?
One could make the argument that they are paying for those through the gas tax money that you use as part of this maintenance, right?
That's in the general fund, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah, but-
actually, we don't use gas tax money for this maintenance, as best I can recall.
Or for the rebuilding of the roads, we are.
For the construction.
Right.
Because, and the reason for that, just so everyone is clear, is because we're not just repairing the trench line, we're overlaying the entire road.
But once the road is down, Ray, it's still going to rain, and there's still going to be oil on the new road.
The electric cars out there, you won't have to worry about the oil anymore. Can't throw rocks at those guys. You know, the problem is, as I see it, and I've read this thing and went to so many meetings, it isn't positively clear. It infers that everything should be in the enterprise fund from a cost side, and it implies that the ERU rate is going to pay for it. However, it also says any other legal revenue source. So it is not, in my view, it's not crystal clear. We probably dropped the ball a little bit because there's a break in the window there that
But,
can filter through.
okay, so if we use my box visualization again, and when I say that I don't think these issues are mutually exclusive, if we say that everything has to be accounted for within the stormwater utility enterprise fund, we also have the ability to, at this particular moment in time, say, okay, for our budgetary purposes today, we need to put X amount of dollars from the general fund into this, account for it. Here now it's in the box, everything is lining up, and at some future point, resolve or reconcile that, either because it is a loan or it's been the discretion of the council to actually move that money. It just to me is important that it is, that it's really squared off like that.
But that's what we're here to do tonight. Are we going to
Yes.
put it on the next council, or are we going to do this again in a month?
I guess
I mean, we're here where we have to make a decision.
I'd like to pull this down to a basic question. For those who think that, yes, it all has to be in the box, from the box, are you willing to raise the ERU rate? Because I can't see that you can't not raise the ERU rate if you say all the money has to come out of the enterprise fund.
Well, I don't
So
know
you-
that, I don't know
You
that
would
we,
be saying here today, we're going to raise the ERU rate.
I don't know that we know that.
Yeah, I
Oh,
don't think you do. Well,
The ERU rates were set without maintenance costs of any
I
kind.
understand, but that was then. How many grant dollars have we gotten? How many are we going to get? How much efficiency can we improve in our construction methods? We don't, everything right now is just kind of, we know it's going to be a lot of money out there, but we don't know exactly and precisely. And we're not deficit from a cash position because we can still borrow from, we're going to get money from the state when we pay for construction. So
Roger, do you agree with Bruce's argument to me that maybe we don't need to raise the ERU rate because we've gotten enough grants to compensate for that lack of consideration of the cost of maintenance?
Well, I agree that we don't have a problem today if you wanted to take the policy of having the utility pay everything. However, I do think that the recurring expense, even if we do have some efficiencies, as Councilor Butcher and we do get some grants, eventually the recurring expense will outweigh those. So the ERU rate will have to be adjusted. It's just really a question of when
Okay,
and
so,
how much.
so my question then is
But that may-
valid
that may
according to
fall-
Roger.
That may fall 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now. And it's not necessarily immediately. And in which case, the ERU may have to be adjusted regardless of what action we take.
Well, Madam Mayor, I think the reality, if I made it sound like, it won't, I was too light on it, you're gonna have to adjust the ERU rate. It's just
Today,
really a question.
now?
Now, we're gonna do everything in our power to get as many grants and to keep the costs as efficient as possible. Right now, you've inquired, and where we are is we're just under budget for what projects we've completed. We're right at budget, which is great, and we've gotten some grants, which of course have helped us. Now, and hopefully that pattern will continue and maybe even be improved upon as we go forward. But remember, for the old system, we know one fact that we can't ignore. The annual maintenance in today's dollars is $300,000. And soon we will have to start taking on the maintenance of the completed elements as they get completed. We can usually wait a year or 2 or 3 for them to operate, and then we'll have to start up some maintenance on those. And those systems, I'm guesstimating, are probably going to be at least a 1-fold, if not a 2-fold increase over that $300,000. So you're going to have an annual recurring cost that's not currently contemplated, somewhere between $600,000 and $1 million. And we will have to, and I'm not a rate consultant, but unless we've all talked, when we're talking about another matter, we're not going to grow ERUs because we don't have that much vacant land. So the ERU count is not going to change dramatically. And the only way to therefore generate more revenue is to increase the rate. And the longer you wait to do that, the larger the increase will be.
Okay, we're beating this to death, so what's the resolution?
I would transfer the general fund, but not as a loan.
And as much as I hate to do it, because of the fact that the ERUs are insufficient, I'm going to have to agree with Joanne, because I don't feel that there's a will to raise the ERU rate. And it should have been higher in the first place. I fought for that. It didn't happen.
Ray? You're going to have to say something now.
I will.
All right.
I will. I'm going to stick to where I was before. I feel that it should be accounted for within the utility as per the ordinance. That's the way I feel about it. And I want to know what the objection is to doing that. Is there an underlying objection as to why we shouldn't do that? I mean, has that come out yet? Is it?
Well,
The raising of the rate.
The two things are the raising of the rate. If you do that, the rate will have to go up, and people were screaming about it when we set those rates.
Oh, so
And Joanne's point that there is a general public benefit, and that the money that we're using doesn't all come from tax dollars. It partially comes from parking fees and other people who come to our island and pollute.
I'm not opposed to moving money. I'm not opposed to moving money from the general fund into the stormwater, but it has to be clearly stated. It has to be accounted for. There has to be a purpose. And it has to be within that, at least in my head, it has to be within the utility. Bruce, what are your thoughts?
In the ERU and no use of general funds, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I just don't, right, okay.
Has to be a line item.
It has to be a line item. Bruce?
It's a quandary because we stated that everything should be accounted for in the enterprise fund. However, we did leave the loophole that you can use any legal revenue, but when you set the rate, when you read the thing about setting the rate, it says to cover everything, is the way I read it too. It's not absolutely perfectly clear that the rate has to cover everything, but I think that's sort of what it's implied.
So for the purpose of getting off go, could we agree that the utility enterprise fund box, whatever, needs to be a clear and transparent accounting of everything relative to stormwater?
Yes.
Yes.
Could we agree that there will be a necessary addition of funds in this budget? I'm looking for a nod from you, Roger. This budget year will require additional funds in that box for maintenance of the stormwater utility.
Yes, we currently estimate we need $300,000 for the upcoming year for maintenance.
So I would just say to get off go, and we can come back and deal with this next week or the week after, that we say, we're going to move that over. We're going to move it over, whether it's call it a loan, call it a move, call it what you want to call it, but it's in the utility. We're moving it to the utility.
I think we need to define now whether it's a loan or it's not. We're just,
I'm more comfortable with it being a loan, quite honestly, and maybe that loan goes on for 20 years. I have no idea, but I'm just so I see it going from here to here, and acknowledging the fact that it's general
you don't
funds.
see a general public
I'm not
purpose or
saying that,
public
Joanne. I
benefit?
think, yes, I do, but I believe that what we told people by creating this utility was X. And, maybe if Jim Steele was sitting here right this second, he'd say, no, Anita, we didn't really say that. And so I want to get off of this. So I'm offering up at least a temporary solution to let us adopt our operating capital budget and an ability to revisit this particular nuance at some point in the future.
So the idea is identified in the budget as a loan to the enterprise fund, the maintenance.
Yes.
Sounds like there's three of you that agree, though.
If three of you agree, then we're done.
Then, yeah, then there's an agreement of the
Okay.
three of you, so let's go
Okay.
with that.
You got that, Mr. Lang? Roger?
Yes.
Thank you. Let's go to the next item, which is a request from the Times Square Merchants Association relative to the recurring permit fee. Do you remember this? And I don't remember exactly what the number is. Does anybody?
Well, this kind of ties in with something else that's going on. The schedule of fees
Yes?
has red items, which are changes, and I think the recurring fee has a change on it here. So that those two are interrelated issues. I'm on page 18 of the packet. Toward the bottom, it says recurring in red, $100 first day times $25 a day for each additional day. So the proposal before us is to increase the recurring fee.
I believe that is the current fee. I don't know, I don't know why it was highlighted, but
Okay,
my
because I asked
recollection that
earlier
is.
today if it was in red, if that was a change.
That was my understanding, but
Okay.
I believe that is the recurring fee.
So are all of those things recurring, events more than 10 days, street performers, background check, permit application, are all of those the same?
Oh, can we do it this way, perhaps, to help you, Counselor? For anyone who, we have the directors here today, if you propose a fee adjustment, could you just step up and say what it was for real quick? And maybe that might be easier.
Jason Green, Community Development. The special event, I think, was a correction to something that fell off a couple fee schedules that go as far as the days in advance and the reoccurring. That $25, I think, puts something back that was missing from the last fee schedule by mistake. So it should be consistent with what was 17, 18 fiscal years.
I guess the whole point with the recurring event fee schedule, whether it's the farmer's market at Santini Plaza or the Sunset Celebration at Times Square, is that here's my permit application, you stamp it, and now I have 52 events. Why am I paying a fee for every single one of those, as opposed to not paying a fee and being done with it? I think that's the argument. I like your shirt, Chelsea.
I don't know, this fee structure of you pay for the first one, and then instead of paying the $100 per, it was discounted by 75% to, for the successive ones. I assume that people said, well, instead of reviewing, 52 of these or 100 of these, you're reviewing it once, it's less staff time or whatever, and
That's right.
I wasn't here, so I really don't know the rationale.
That was the rationale.
Okay, so I just think that, if you feel the fee is too high, then we should adjust it.
Chelsea,
I don't
what
know
was-
that there's
what was the
any,
fee for that?
magical amount that is correct or incorrect
Got
with
it.
this thing.
Okay.
Did they also pay to rent the space each
That
time?
went away. That was an additional fee that went away.
So they don't even pay to rent the space, the public space. They just pay the $1,800 and they can use that public space every weekend all year long?
Joanne, was that the number? Because I forgot the number. $1,800.
It was 1810 or something like that.
okay.
I'm just vaguely remembering from my email.
I guess then my question is, events of more than 10 days, it says an additional 10% per day. I don't remember that being in there before.
So there's a fee, because there's a minimum length of time that you have to submit it, 45 days prior to your event. And
Okay,
there's
so-
a charge for every
But
day
this
less
says,
than that.
this doesn't say when you turn in the permit. This says events with more than 10 days. So that language would lead me to believe that there's an additional 10% penalty. If they have an event every week, after 10 weeks, then there's an additional 10% charge, the way that's worded.
That's what it reads to me too, Roxanne.
Most of this was putting back in what was there before, and I can't answer the policy of why it was like that before.
Okay, well, I would delete that line for sure. Events with more than 10 days. We're already charging them per day
Can
on the
everybody
line
agree to
above.
that? Is there anybody objects to that? Okay.
How much they paid last year? I'm looking at it too, but it's not very clear to me.
Yes, that's right, Chelsea.
And while she's going to look, the street performance, you're also saying that's the same and we're just adding it back in because it got dropped out?
It was 2,080 per year, according to the email from Mr. Lalo, is all I'm saying. And he's asking for what, a 50% reduction in it? Wait a minute, no. Our proposal was well received? No, it went down to 1,080.
It went to 10880 and then it went back up. Is that right, Joanne? So-
2012, it went down to 1,080. This is just according to Mr. Lalo's email.
Let's take a 5-minute break. Go. Somebody get let's go. Bruce?
Okay, Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
While
Thank you,
Council Butcher's
everyone.
coming back. we
Let me
have-
just, hold on
okay.
1 second. It's 6:55. We're reconvening. Let's see if we can get this wrapped up. Chelsea? Or,
I'm going to pass this to Jason since he oversees
okay.
that person.
What? Say it.
So we're specifically dealing with the Times Square recurring permit fee.
Which one? This one? Yeah, the council $100, 107 days at 25 is $26.50 for
I'm sorry?
26.50 for 1819. Plus there was the renting the space, $337.82. It's 82, right? Okay.
They are paying to rent the space.
Yes, what's the total?
26.50 plus 337.82 plus 100.
Under 3,000.
Just, yeah.
So 29.3,
For how many events?
107 days.
107 days.
Our staff only has to touch the application once.
That's correct.
And we don't help them set up.
That's how I see it. And it,
And they
Go
pay
ahead.
for the music.
yes?
Question is, if we reduce for them, do we reduce for the farmer's market? Because they're a recurring,
I suspect if they came in and made a request, I guess
well,
we could
no,
review that
are
as
we
well.
going to change this number on here for everybody? Because we only touch the application once and we aren't doing setup for them? Is our,
To me,
our
that's
collection
fair.
money exceeding what staff spends on it?
Well, you could look at the 100 too. The 100 doesn't cover anything that we do, frankly. If you want to put that to 500 and then change the fee, that might be doing something, but we didn't want to propose that.
What's your proposal, Rexanne? I'll give you good money.
I'd say $50 first day and, geez, the 25 racks up. $15 a day after that?
Jason, what does it really cost to process one of these special events permits?
Well, you saw today, so the discussions, so we go through a couple hours of that internally, so. I
That's
don't
not-
know, I don't know,
The
Rogers,
recurring
or-
event is a different thing. They come in and say, we're doing this event exactly the same as we've done last year. We're not asking for anything different.
Believe it or not, some people ask for other things different in their
Well,
paperwork.
then they don't fall into this category.
We check it. Administratively, we have to review it, we have to compare it, there is a couple hours, I'll say at least 2 to 2.5 hours per application.
You know, we talk about giving world-class service here, service. Is this service worth $3,000?
This conversation, to be honest with you, isn't worth $3,000.
It's
I'll be
not.
honest with you, why don't we just, make it, if it's on town property, it's free and move on. We'll charge them the rent for the space, for the physical dirt, because we have that under our ordinance, and make it zero. Let's just move on. It's $3,000.
But then that doesn't apply, then we've got an inequity between the recurring events.
No, leave everything the same and just say if it's on the town's
It's on
property.
town property.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The Beach Farmers Market is a recurring event, so they're going to come in here and they're going to have to pay $2,000 or $3,000.
But it's not on town property. Not on town property.
But what I'm
That's what
saying
I'm-
is, we touch it one time.
Okay.
It seems to me that the fee is too high. That's what I'm going to say, and I'll sit back. I think it should be reduced.
Joanne?
Disagree.
Bruce?
I think it's too much for,
Okay, can we just not say it's too much? Somebody's
Okay.
got to give a number
I
here
gave
because.
numbers.
Okay,
I said $50 for the first day, $15 a day for each additional day.
We just signed a contract of how much we pay per hour to our employees. I wouldn't think that $50, at least if you're going to do it 100 to start with and then do some minimal amount later,
I think she asked you for a number then. If you don't want mine, give us numbers.
$100 a day and $10 for each other day.
I'll go with that.
I'll go with that.
done.
Okay, but
Bingo.
All right, that, but
I don't know
that
what
plus
that
the
ends up
land, right?
being.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to be clear. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Next item, the next one was?
right
Oh,
under that is street performers are in red.
mhm.
And I was told earlier today that meant changes.
That is not, this, Chelsea O'Reilly, Public Works Manager, sorry. These prices have never been memorialized in the fee schedule. In the ordinance, it says, please see fee schedule. It's never been in the fee schedule, so they're in there.
Okay, but there's no change to
No
them.
change, no change at all.
No
Just
change,
put in
Roxanne.
there.
Okay, no change to street performers. I want to verify this. No change to other license fees and permits. Then on the back, all the parasailing, beach raking, those are all no changes?
The only change that I have submitted is the Public Works review fee, because we sub that out to a professional engineer to review.
Okay, so
any
that's on the
permits.
previous page 17,
That's the
Public
only,
Works review fee. What about above that where it says Loma Lomer, $500 in red?
So we were doing that for free. And
Okay.
other communities are charging anywhere from $500 to $3,000, maybe more. So
Okay,
that is as accurate as I can get estimate of the time that it takes so the town recovers their cost.
Excellent.
so those are new, and I'm okay with both of those.
Anybody else have anything for fee schedule?
No, I have more.
Oh, go ahead, Rick.
On page 22, parking decals, lost, stolen, replacement, right-of-way per resolution, are those new?
we have had quite a few people, snowbirds, come in. They get a new car, they use a rental car. There's a cost to purchase these stickers, and so we'd like, what other cities are doing is charging a nominal fee to do a replacement tag. For
Answer is yes, it's new.
that one's new,
And it's
yes,
$5.
yes.
And the right-of-way resolution is the same as it was? It's right under parking decal.
You all adopted a resolution, $100 for the first year, $50 each year thereafter. So again, it's memorializing what you have already adopted.
And the bottom of the same page, not in red, you're proposing a change to a 70-30 split on the people who teach at Newton Park. And we had grandfathered them all in prior years, and I'd like to continue the grandfathering and not change that split.
I can support that. What was the split? There was no
The
split?
split now is 75-25. I contacted the yoga instructor last night. She told me it was 75-25.
Allison Geeson. So the
Hi,
short-term, hello, the short-term instructors, which they sign for anybody, like a yoga instructor or anybody who does that, was 70-30. So something that Amy Baker, the contracts manager, helps to provide the contracts annually, each year. So are you proposing that you wanted it to be 75-25?
I was told via, I texted the yoga instructor last night because I didn't know if this was an increase or not. And she said, yes, it is an increase. You're telling me it's not an increase? She
I think it's
believes-
I think it's an increase from a couple of years ago. I don't think it was an
We
increase.
didn't increase it a couple years ago. I remember saying, we grandfathered, it's in here. Council Amendment 9/8/2016, grandfathered Newton Park, the yoga instructors for the price to stay the same. So she was mistaken about,
I would have to look at the contract. I don't want to say something that's
okay.
But just
Well,
pick a-
just to make it clear, let's keep it the same,
All right,
whatever
so
that
is that,
was.
is that, why don't we just make it the same rate for everybody? Because I think that's, for us, that's the most difficult thing, that someone says, well, with this person it's X, that person's Y, the staff makes a mistake over two different rate structures. If you would like it to be 75-25, we'll make it 75-25 for everybody when their contract renews.
Okay,
75-25?
I just want it to stay the same.
Does anybody disagree with 75-25? No. Okay. Thank you, Roger. Anything else, Roxanne?
I think I covered all the red things and otherwise, so.
Joanne, do you have anything?
Well, are we set on our add-on list? Or were you just on
Okay,
the,
I
on
was
the
just
fees
going
right now?
on, yeah,
I'm fine on the fees.
that was it. Those were the ones that were brought up. Okay, go ahead. Add-on list?
Well, I just want to go down, we just had a couple of loose ends still, I thought, on the add-on list. And to me, you know, we talked about.
Base and cameras and.
We talked about, yeah. And so I'm just saying that amount of money was, what we had there was like 65,000 left there, I think. And I think that, you know, we need to think about safety first. I think the camera at Times Square. I also would like to put some extra money toward code enforcement, weekend, nights, and in season. There are a lot of problems with noise and whatever, and I think we should put that. I think that's really important. With regard to the PIO, I guess I'm concerned because we have $10,000 allocated for the website update, and I think that a lot of our problem lies in our website design. And I would like to, I don't know that 10,000 is enough for that, but we have the new mobile app also coming that's ready to go online from CRAB. And I'm wondering if the staff wouldn't benefit from some technology in service as well that might help with the communication. So I personally, I'm a little concerned about the PIO position and what that would be when we really don't have a good website and a good mobile app, and we need cameras and I think increased code enforcement. So I throw those out. That's my comment.
I don't see where you're talking about because my packet today doesn't have the add-on list in it. So are you referring to stuff in the old packet?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's just referring to one line item.
One line item.
It was the
And
original.
that we never really finished
It was
out.
the original $65,000 for RMA. That's what that line item was.
Right. But we didn't finish defining some of those other things. I don't know if we need to or not, or you have enough direction, Roger, or what's going on with that? Because we also just recently got the other email about PIO and everything. So if we don't need a discussion, so be it, but that's the only thing for me.
Okay. Did you, okay, so Joanne, are you basically saying you would take the 65 that's sitting there and make it all increase to base, code enforcement, cameras, and,
Upgrading the website.
but the
and-
website already has a line item.
Of 10, right? And then I don't know if there's some cost with the new mobile app ready to come online. We've got a great mobile app, and it needs to be coordinated into the website.
Show me where
And-
the 65,000 is on this list.
Let me see.
It's at the very top. So you would take that whole line item and turn it into public safety? Yeah. Okay,
Yes, I would. I would put it in public safety.
okay.
I would not, I think we've got enough flexibility in our schedule to get cameras. I'm in favor of getting the cameras, but I don't think we need to get rid of the PIO in order to do that.
Okay, Ray?
How much more do we need for, to upgrade the website? How, did you say there was a line item already for how much? 10,000. 10,000? Joanne, how much of that 60 are you looking, Joanne, throwing at the website?
So my understanding is that there's, not counting the 10,000 that's already in for the list of items that Council Shamp was discussing, there's $40,000 sort of on the table for that list of items.
Which list of items,
The
Roger?
items, whether it's PIO or cameras or augmenting the website above the $10,000.
Okay, so it's not 65, it's 40 that we're
No,
talking about?
65 is going to the marketing firm. That's what our contract is for.
right.
There was because of the discussion of these items, it was incremented up by $41,000 to try to address some of these
Okay.
issues.
And is,
It can be
and
further
is,
incremented tonight if you want.
and is the $10,000 adequate for updating the website, or do you see further need?
I'll have to defer to Michelle. That might be a little bit on the low side, but I don't think it's triple that number. I know, I think it's.
Because I think
could be
that's
15.
really, really critical.
I think you're right. I think it's
Really
it's
critical.
an
I mean, I know where stuff is in there, and I can't find
Yeah,
it.
I agree with you on that.
Yes, but again, so if you don't, well, never mind. Okay.
So where we are, just to help you perhaps move forward, we have $41,000, and that's what's in the budget. Remember, budget is a planning document. You can, at your next meeting, direct us how to spend that. You don't have to necessarily decide that tonight, but that's what we have for that array of items that you've been discussing the last
Is
couple
there
of
anyone
minutes.
other than Joanne who would like to get rid of the concept of the PIO? I don't. Drexan doesn't.
I don't know if Joanne was saying that.
Oh, yeah, that's what she said.
I'm saying I'm not sure that that's our biggest problem right now, that we do need to upgrade. We have a lot of other things we need to do, and you know, if some PI information has to be brought in, but I'm not sure where that falls in. I don't see it as
It's
a
a different
huge
point of view.
full-time job. I'm not looking to hire another employee. Maybe you are, I'm not.
So I listened to the last meeting when you guys were wrestling this, and I'm a little confused. When you say a PIO, what is that person going to do? They're going to get data? Then what are they going to do with the data?
So, so Allison and Chelsea actually, I guess, have worked a little bit on this. They sent out they sent out criteria for a job description. What we have been talking about at various different meetings with various different groups is our inability to tell our story, whether that's the fact that during hurricane, and this, please nobody take offense to anything I say at this point. We had a hurricane, and 3 days after, we were 3 days behind in anything posting to a website. We've got people doing media jobs, doing public outreach jobs. That's not their job. It's not Christie's job to do social media, and social media is a critical, important part of any kind of organization at this point in time. It's critical. And as we talk about how we're moving into the future, how we're doing that, how we're taking that next step, being able to communicate who we are, why we're doing something, how we're doing it, what's going on, it is super, super important, especially in this day and age of 24/7 consumption of information. The website is just a tiny example of what needs to be improved.
Okay, so again, how will we disseminate the information? Are we talking Facebook and website?
I think did you see the email that Allison sent, or Roger
No.
actually copied to everyone?
No.
So there was a whole list of obligations. It was surveying, it's newslettering, it's social media, it's all of those things. Allison, did you want to make any comment on this, or would you rather not? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just, when we had our meeting with BORCAB, this was a big deal.
I have a copy if you wanted to see, Bruce, what she was referring to that was sent in the email from Roger. Did you want to look at that?
Please. The only reason I mention it is because in other conversations we've had about communicating, people said, well, people don't want to get emails. They don't want to be called. They don't want it in their water bill. So I was just wondering how we're going to disseminate this information.
Okay.
I mean, you have Kay and her outfit. Can they do some of this stuff part-time?
I think you could probably do anything part-time. I think that in this next period of the town's history, I think that would be a crime and shame. But you know what? I'm not going to be sitting here, so that's to be determined. But it is a huge hole in our organization, if you ask me. And I've made this pitch again for years, but.
Well, I believe we need it because of several reasons, and I pointed this out at the last meeting. I am tired of being the person who is correcting all the misinformation that is out there. I spend most of my time talking to the citizens of this town and telling them, no, what you heard is not correct. That would be the job of a PIO. In addition to that, everybody says, I've never heard of Bay Oaks. Well, that would be the job of the PIO. They need to get that out there, and I'm not the expert. When you say, how are we going to do this, the job of the PIO is to decide and figure out how is it best to get these things out. Facebook, Twitter, all of these things that they need to be using. So that's two I can name right off the top of my head of things that this person should be doing. In addition, when we have different things going on, they're always calling us for comments. And it's not appropriate that town council members be commenting on things from our own personal perspectives. So when they call me and say, well, what do you think about X, Y, Z? I'm going to say the PIO will give the statement on behalf of, this is the town's position. It won't be slanted by any one of us.
How does that relate to the town clerk for information?
The town clerk is, for example, her job is to be disseminating information during emergencies, and I don't know that that's appropriate. She should be able to say to the clerk, put out a press release about X, instead of her having to write it. That's what the PIO would do, would be write the press release.
Well, and Michelle, I mean no disrespect here, I'm just having a conversation. I believe that you may be transitioning to retirement at some point. The discussion, I know, see, I'm making you happy. So the discussion is, and once again, I mean no disrespect, I'm older than you are. Does the next town clerk need to be that person who has better or different computer skills, as well as, in other words, is this a different integrated type of position? It's just a
I think the clerk's jobs duties are set forth in the charter, and being a PIO isn't one of them.
I believe it falls under and other duties as directed by the town manager.
How many other directors in this town right now are doing jobs that aren't their job? How many?
Raise your hand.
It is a lack. And how do we go about talking about world-class service, branding, who are we, what are we, without saying, without telling somebody? I
They'll
just
have a PIO.
Sanibel has a very different city manager. I would say that Judy Zamamra is Sanibel's PIO, up to and including photographs. She just does she is very much a,
When I
she just does a
looked
different
at it,
task.
some of the other towns just run a banner across, an active banner across the top that gives something current, and then within the website. So it's just the banner really that gets updated with something that you want to disseminate. But
So what I'm hearing is 2 no's, 1 no, and 2 yeses. And?
On the PIO?
Yeah.
I think we need a PIO. I never said we didn't.
Okay, I just didn't hear you say.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay.
another employee.
Oh, maybe it'll be a contract person. Make it a contract person, Roger.
Maybe,
You're just trying to get
is
my
that
goat, aren't you?
consultant that we're hiring, is she gonna make suggestions along those lines?
Well, I think the position or person who will be carrying forward what the marketing
Exactly.
plan is, or you all will approve a marketing plan, and that person will become, after a transition, will become responsible for the day-to-day implementation of that plan, is how I envision it.
Is there support for Roger to find funds for cameras in Times Square? I say yes. You say yes? You say yes? Anybody else say yes? Done. Is there support for additional, what did you say, evening and?
Code enforcement in the evening,
Aren't they
especially
until 10
downtown.
o'clock now?
On the noise ordinance?
Yeah, the noise ordinance
But
is a
aren't
real
they until
problem.
10 o'clock now?
So it's a double-edged sword here. I want to be careful where, I hate to do it at this late hour, but I want to be very careful. We ask these people to adjust their schedule during season when the restaurants, et cetera, are busier, to stay beyond 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock for the express purposes of sort of the last thing they do before they go home is remind all the businesses about the decibels and the time to cut off their music. That's different from going and knocking on someone's door and saying you're making too much noise. We do not want our employees getting into that business after dark. So right now, we adjust our base schedule so that people do that during season, and if you want to make it an all-year endeavor, we can try to adjust the funding to accomplish that.
I just know we get a lot of complaints at midnight with loud music, and I don't know how we resolve that. It's.
Well,
When I had a noise problem on my street, I called the sheriff, they showed up.
I just saw on the news last night, and I'm pretty sure it's Cape Coral that is changing their process for noise enforcement, where they're allowing citizens to go out with their camera, record the noise, and turn it in to the police.
Remember, that's the one we just turned down a little while ago. Roger tried to add on, and it's one of those things I regret voting no on.
I'm just saying, I think it's Cape Coral is trying something new and different, and you just may want to look at that at some point in time.
Anybody want to ask for further funding for additional base at night to midnight?
On
For
weekends.
the,
Just me, it looks like.
no, I want the sheriff to pay, attention. I don't want to ask Mark Pergoli or the other guys to hang out till midnight because the top of the mast is continuing to play over and over and over again their music that they shouldn't be doing and bothering the adjacent neighborhoods. I want the sheriff to go there and tell them to shut up, quite honestly. But I don't want to ask our base people to, it's just a lot.
So the compromise that I'm hearing, if there is one, is that we can add additional staff hours for base people to patrol for the noise, but they wouldn't actually go do the enforcement. They would report it to the police. They wouldn't go knock on the door or go up to the proprietor and say, they would just stop and report it to the police. They would wait for the police to show up and handle the matter at that point. But they would be out being proactive in that respect. If that's
Any support for
the
that?
middle ground for what I think you might be saying.
I would support that.
I wouldn't.
All right, and that was it. Okay, could Gary, Jordan, could you skip the shut up part? I'm short of temper at this point. Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to be rude. I didn't mean to be rude. I didn't. It's just, you know what? You have one problem. You have a recurring problem, and I hate throwing a lot of money at one problem because that one problem should be resolved by now, and it still isn't. Anyhow, okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not following your
I'm
comment.
talking
about
about
one
the
location.
recurring noise problem downtown. It's an issue. And the sheriff should have dealt with it already, but that's okay. I'll make a call tomorrow. Anything else here? I'm just going to go to you, Joanne.
If that's
Anything
what's going to
else?
cure the problem is a call to the sheriff, then I'll take my vote back for
No,
spending
no,
extra
no,
money.
let's move on. No, I'm good.
Roxanne, anything further?
I've disagreed with you too many times tonight.
I
Roxanne?
was going to move to approve Resolution 1925, adopting the town's operating budget, capital budget, and fee schedules for fiscal year 2019-2020 that are consistent with the requirements of the town comprehensive plan.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Bob, is there something additional that needs to be read?
If I may, I'll read the title of the resolution
Yes,
very
please
quickly.
do.
Resolution number 19-25, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, adopting the final annual budget, capital improvement plan, and fee schedule for the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Lee County, Florida, for fiscal year 2019-2020, and providing an effective date. This has been properly advertised and is properly before you as set forth in Section 5 of the, no, I'm sorry, that's it.
And John, would we have to
Just-
include the amendments they made this evening?
Yeah, and I
Yes.
was just going to say that, and the changes that we have already indicated to the town manager, which I am sure he has made due note of.
Yes.
Anything you need clarification on, Roger? Further
No,
clarification?
I just, the only thing I will say is, we will put together a report, just so you have it for the record, and we have it for the record of the amendments, so that they're on a
Thank you
piece of
very
paper.
much. Thank you very
That you
much.
could attach to your budgets.
Bob, is there anything you need further clarification on?
Not a clarification, I was just going to ask that in your approval of the budget,
Yes, sir.
that the value be incorporated in the statement.
Roxanne, could you state that value, please?
And that would be $20,361,610.
That's it, thank you.
I got the right number.
Okay. Roxanne, you made the motion. If you could push the mover button, and Ray, if you would do that.
Do we have
And,
discussion?
Hold on. Yeah, discussion.
So, just to be clear, this includes the discussion that we had about stormwater, where the
it does.
town is loaning the money to the enterprise fund for maintenance.
Correct.
Okay.
My comment is that I still object to that being a loan. I strongly object to that. But that being said, I would not vote against this budget because we have a town manager and his staff who are serving the community really well financially, and I don't want to do a no vote and have anybody think that. So I'm voting yes under that duress.
That,
Well, you
that's
know
what a
what?
team, that's what a team player does.
Well,
And that's good.
That's, okey-doke. Kumbaya. It's-
That's not what I meant.
I know. Anybody else? Any other comment? Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I believe everyone has pushed their button, and the motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. Man, that was, that was
One more item,
actually
Madam Mayor.
the best budget discussion I've been a part of in 6 years.
There's something wrong with you.
But it was big.
One
big
more
stuff.
resolution, Madam
Okay, the
Mayor.
next item on the agenda is Resolution 19-20, adopting water rates. This is to approve 1920, a resolution adopting water rates, implementing town council policy for the continued phasing of rates necessary to fund the water improvement program. Anybody?
I have a question.
Bueller? Ferris. What's your question, Roxanne?
My question is, like the stormwater, I think these were originally set up by Jim Steele? Or is that, am I not remembering
The
correctly?
water precedes Jim Steele.
It
The
precedes
wa-
him?
the water is, was reviewed by a rate consultant.
That's right, thank you. And we haven't gotten any state money to help with water like we have with stormwater. That's all gone
Correct.
to stormwater.
The general rule of thumb is that the state will be more inclined to help with something new than replacement of old.
Okay. So I would be in favor of going with the pre-planned increases that we had already considered as necessary.
But, Bruce, anything?
My only thought about it is that it needs to be reviewed again, the 5-year audit.
Ray, any comments? Joanne?
Sadly, we have to raise 7%. We don't have any choice. This is what we have to do, so.
May I have a motion, please, to adopt resolution number 1920?
I'll move to approve Resolution 19-20, resolution adopting water rates, implementing town council policy for the continued phasing of rates necessary to fund the water improvement program. Is there anything else I have to read, John?
The actual, if someone wants to read the title of the resolution, it's a slightly different.
A resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, adopting updated water rates incidental to the operation of the town's water utility system and providing an effective date.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. And is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye and push your button.
Aye.
And the motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is final public comment. I see no public. Mr. Herron?
Yes. I've distributed to each one of you pursuant to discussion we had during the regular council meeting that we have reached a settlement between the town of Fort Myers Beach and Prasad Properties Florida Investments LLC, the owner of the two unfinished structures adjacent to the Junkanoo restaurant area, asked authorization or approval of the settlement agreement and authorization of appropriate staff to execute the settlement documents as deemed necessary.
It's excellent news. Excellent news. Any questions or comments on this from anybody? Roxanne?
I was just going to say thank you for all your work on this, John, and I would move to approve the settlement agreement.
What was the exact wording you wanted in that motion?
Approval of the settlement agreement and authorizing the appropriate town individuals to execute the settlement documents, including outside counsel.
Okay, I'm going to say all those words, but the reason I keep leaving things out is that our blue sheets have requested motion.
Yep.
And so I've been reading the requested motion. So maybe we need to be more careful about what we're putting in the requested motion so that when we read it, we get it right the first time.
Yeah, no,
That's okay. That's
Yeah,
good. Yep.
yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
So I add all the words that John just indicated
Yes.
to my motion.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on this? Yes, sir. Yes, there was. There's a motion and a second, and hearing no further discussion, is there any objection to the motion? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Anything else,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Herron?
much.
Nothing else? Okay. And so, it's very sad. This could bring us to the end of our time together today, but I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Very much. Thanks.